I nodded and smiled at him. In my past life at this point in time, I didn't know how to cook. I would take us out to eat whilst trying to save what little money we had. If I took care of the water and electric bills, that would take about a quarter of the money I had. It was still early in the month, and who knew when Diana would give me the next allowance? In any case, I had no choice because we needed water and power. We couldn't use water from buckets and candles for light. Diana was certainly not going to take care of it, and no one else was going to help me. In this life, I wouldn't let Diana's antics stress me out. I would cook and clean for myself and make money my own way. I went to the large kitchen and checked the cupboards and fridge to see what was inside. There wasn't much to cook with, and the fridge was empty because there was no power. Let's go take care of the power and water bills, and then let's go shopping to get ingredients, I told Tony. After preparing ourselves to go out, we left the house and rushed to go pay the bills before the offices closed. We then went to the grocery store to get ingredients to make dinner. Returning home, I was glad to see the power was working and we had water. Tony and I began to prepare dinner. I had him help me either cut some ingredients or put them into the pot. Mum, this is really good, he commented as he ate. I didn't know you could cook. I smiled as he complimented my cooking. I'm glad he didn't have too many questions about why I knew how to cook. I had years of practice unbeknownst to him. We ate dinner and washed the dishes, then I had him prepare for bed. After he brushed his teeth, I tucked him into his bed. So tomorrow you're really not going to see Daddy? He asked. I recalled that on Sundays when Keith didn't go to work, I would go to his home, our former home, and demand to see him. He never let me see him, of course. No, I'm going to stay with you, I assured Anthony. He smiled at me with a look of relief. Sleep tight, Tony. I love you, I told him and kissed him on his forehead. Good night, Mum, he told me. I caressed his hair as he slowly but surely began to fall asleep. I watched him as he slept for a while. My whole day replayed in my mind as I did. I couldn't believe I'd died and come back again. Regardless of how it had happened, I was just so grateful to have been given this second chance. Looking at Tony's peaceful, sleeping face, I realized I had taken so many moments like this for granted. Funny how you appreciate something once you lose it. In this life, I wanted to enjoy every moment with my son after experiencing the regret I felt earlier. I wanted to have no regrets this time. After a while of watching him sleep, I got up and quietly left his room, closing his door behind me. With him now sleeping, my mind then went to worrying about our finances. With less than $1,000 and a whole month ahead of us, I had to figure out how to make more money. I could rely on my family, neither could rely on Keith and Diana. The only good thing about my situation was I didn't have to pay rent. Keith owned this property. Hopefully, I would find a job soon, so we didn't have to worry too much about our finances. After making sure all the doors were locked, I went to my room and began to work on my CV and research open job positions. I was hoping I would finish soon so that by Monday I could already start applying. The next day, Tony and I stayed at home. As I had promised him, I didn't go anywhere. I decided that this would be a good time to clean the house. It would a few more years of having to clean for myself before I really got used to it. Tony helped me as well, and by the afternoon the house was immaculately clean. Once we were done, I took him to the park after lunch. It was relaxing not having to stress myself worrying about Keith or Diana, just having fun with my son. Tony, you have school tomorrow. Remember to make sure all your books are packed, your uniform and your bag is ready, I reminded him once we returned home. Suddenly, his expression changed. It went from being happy to nervous and sad. A look of concern then appeared on my face. Yes, Mum, he responded and went to do as I had told him. I instantly knew he was worried about school, and it was most likely because of the situation we were in. There was no doubt in my mind that the other children were talking about our situation and giving him a hard time. I knew from my past life that when my friends stopped talking to me after they switched to Diana's side, their children that were Tony's friends as well turned away from him as well. It was unfortunate that he was suffering as if he had done something wrong. Tony went to a prestigious private school for wealthy families. At the very least, despite kicking us out of the house, Keith allowed Tony to remain enrolled at the school. Diana couldn't interfere with that because it would be obvious to Keith if he suddenly wasn't enrolled. Diana only inconvenienced us in things she knew Keith wouldn't find out about. Diana's son, Marco, was also enrolled at the school, which made me nervous. Since he was a year older than Tony, he was a grade above him, so at least they weren't in the same class. However, they would still occasionally bump into each other. I worried for Tony when they bumped into each other. I wondered if it was awkward for them. Was Marco also bullying him? Jasmine's POV. Diana's son, Marco, was also enrolled at the school, which made me nervous. Since he was a year older than Tony, he was a grade above him, so at least they weren't in the same class. However, they would still occasionally bump into each other. I worried for Tony when they bumped into each other. I wondered if it was awkward for them. After we had dinner, we cleaned up and then I had him prepare for bed. "Are you always going to spend time with me like this?" he then asked me as I tucked him into his bed. In my past life, I had let the stress of the Keith-Diana situation get to me. In the past, I typically would talk and briefly be with him before I would continue to devise ways to get Keith to make Tony the heir. I didn't spend this much time with him. He must be surprised by how I was suddenly so available. However, in this life, now knowing how things end, I wanted to give him my undivided attention. I wanted no regrets this time. If Keith's path was a dead end, then let me choose a path that definitely wouldn't be. I smiled as I looked into his eyes and nodded. "Yes, it's going to be like this from now on," I assured him. He began to laugh. "I'm so happy," he said. "Why? Didn't do anything." "It's so much more fun when you're here." Hearing that almost made me tear up. I felt guilty again that I had been oblivious to how he felt. After talking to him for a bit, I put him to sleep and then quietly left his room. Once again, before bed, I finished up working on my CV. The following day, I woke up early to help Anthony prepare for school, as well as to prepare myself to send out job applications. After breakfast, I left the house with Tony as I rushed to get him to school. Since we were using public transport, I worried we would get there late on top of having to face Yorkshire City's busy traffic. Upon arriving, on time luckily, I lead Tony into school. The school was beautiful, sophisticatedly designed and large. It was like a university campus with how big it was, maybe even bigger. Part of the reason was there were 3 school divisions that made up the school: a daycare, a primary school, and a high school. So the wealthy could easily keep their children in one place through the different stages of their education. By the entrance of the school building, I saw fancy car after fancy car pass by and drop off a child. Not a single child didn't have a driver. All these children were from rich families. Of course, they all had drivers. I must have been the only to bring my child myself, let alone with public transport. Tony must be so embarrassed. As I walked my son to the entrance, I noticed a few of the parents who had come out of their cars to say goodbye to their kids looking at me and my son. The judgment was clear in their eyes. It wasn't hard to know what they were thinking. That's the woman whose husband kicked her out of the house. I just felt bad Tony was also being affected. I knew many of them. Either they used to be my friends or were Keith's friends. "All right, enjoy your day at school. I'll come pick you up later," I quickly said to Tony, not wanting him to have to spend too much time with me as we got judged. Tony nodded his head in acknowledgement, but he didn't say anything. Whether it was embarrassment or fear, I didn't know, but I understood nonetheless. I then watched him walk off and enter the school building. I then turned away and walked away, leaving the school, feeling all the eyes on me as I walked away. I didn't mind the stares and being judged. However, I was worried for Tony to an extent. From the school, I then went into the Yorkshire City Centre and went to the various companies I had researched that had job openings. At each company, I presented myself and my application. It was late in the afternoon when I was done with the last company I had to visit. I crossed my fingers as I hoped I would be accepted into one of the positions. Checking the time, it was 14:30 p.m. In about an hour, I would have to pick up Tony, who was finishing at 16:00. I decided to have lunch and then get him. Upon arriving home, after I cleaned up and had Tony do the same, I then began making dinner as he did his homework. As we ate dinner, I tried to make conversation, but he didn't say much. His responses were short. Tony hadn't spoken much to me since I picked him up from school. Unlike yesterday, when he was full of energy and extremely talkative, today, he seemed to be in a bad mood. My expression fell upon noticing this. I suppose school really depressed him. My mind then began to race as I thought of what I could do to help him in this situation. "Tony, is everything okay?" I tried to ask him. "I'm fine, Mum," he responded in a low voice. Clearly, he was lying to me. I felt sad that he didn't feel comfortable opening up to me. At bedtime, I went to tuck him in. I could only hope that sleeping would help him wake up feeling more positive. But then I realized he would be returning to the place that made him depressed. He got into his blankets. Then I noticed his pajama top was buttoned up wrongly. Was he so upset he hadn't noticed? I wondered. "Your buttons are done all wrong," I said to him as I brought my hand to his pajamas and unbuttoned one of the misbuttoned parts. Doing so, I was then met with a dark purple mark that was on his chest. His hand quickly grabbed mine to stop me from continuing. However, I had already seen the mark. "Your buttons are done all wrong," I said to him as I brought my hand to his pajamas and unbuttoned one of the misbuttoned parts. Doing so, I was then met with a dark purple mark that was on his chest. His hand quickly grabbed mine to stop me from continuing. However, I had already seen the mark. "Tony, what is that?" I asked him worriedly. I moved his hand away and looked at the mark once more. Once again, he pulled away from me so I wouldn't see. "Don't worry, Mum, it's nothing. I'll fix my shirt myself," he said to me. I was horrified by his answer. "What you mean it's nothing? It's completely purple," I told him. "I fell," he told me.